You're sitting in the silence, drowning in the doubt. I've been sitting there before, I know there's a way out. The world feels like it's caving in. Those dark thoughts, don't let them win. Just stay. Just stay. I know it's almost more than you can take. Please just stay. I swear the light will find you someday. So just stay.
This week's episode is near and dear to my heart because I have been personally affected by Matt and Tess's foundation called Sunrise After Suicide. And it is so good to meet them almost in person. Good to chat with them. I think a week or two after my son Elijah passed, I got an email from a friend saying that she had nominated me for this foundation. And within a couple weeks, they had reached out to me and they had helped with some of my funeral expenses. And it just blows me away that complete strangers can show up for people in the way that these two did. And I'm so grateful, not only for that, but to have them on this podcast with us to share their insight and their kindness with you all. So Matt and Tess Holyoke, I would love it if you could share with our listeners a little bit about yourselves and your story.
Yeah, I can jump in. First of all, like you said, this is our first time actually speaking in person / over technology in person. But I definitely don't really think of you guys as strangers, as weird as that sounds with our tie into Rexburg. Like, for example, when we heard about your son, I heard about it from multiple people. One of my best friends has been a client of your husband's for probably over 10 years now. And like you mentioned, one of your friends was one of my mom's best friends. And so it was a very natural for us to, give back to some of the area that we felt like gave back to us. I'm from Rexburg. My mom's she's not from Rexburg, but I grew up there from, the time that Ricks College became BYU Idaho. So we have got a lot of friends there. And so that same community that I'm sure, had access to, some of those same people were there for me and my family when my mom passed away. And so it meant a lot to us to be able to give back to that community. And so we're always happy to do that. But like you said, my name is Matt Holyoke, and we founded the Sunrise After Suicide about 2-ish years ago, 3 years ago. Yeah. And we have gotten a lot of kind of satisfaction and ability to serve other people through this foundation. And it feels so great when our cause fits with something that we feel like we can actually do for somebody. And so I'm sure you guys can relate to that with your podcast and some of the listeners that you have access to. But yeah, we really love it when we get a chance to give back.
I'm Tess Holyoke. Obviously, my husband and I started this foundation together, and one of the main reasons propelling that is because we lost Matt's mom to suicide in May of 2022. And we went through it. We saw how hard it was and how people wanted to help, but they weren't quite sure how to even talk about suicide in the first place. And that over the next year kind of inspired us to want to do this. And around the time she died, I was in grad school to become a therapist. And now I've been practicing about 2 or 3 years. And mental health is something we're very passionate about, and talking openly about suicide loss, suicide prevention, suicide postvention is something we're very passionate about. And I mean, that was another big drive for us, is there's not a lot of postvention resources available for people that have lost people to suicide. There's a lot of pre, which is very important, but there's not a lot of post. What do you do after the fact? How do you grieve properly? Who can support you? What resources are available? Yeah, that's kind of what started everything.
You know, it's interesting. I've never heard of, you called it postvention?
Funny word, but it's exactly like what it sounds like. It's, prevention is obviously something that can happen before, an action's taken place, but postvention is how to kind of react after something has happened. And so in this case, it's ways that we found to work with families who have been affected by a suicide loss.
So what does postvention look like?
Yeah, great question.
Like, I have no idea. This is the first I've ever heard of it.
Yeah, great question. And again, that is kind of what we decided to focus our foundation on, is this kind of element of postvention, because as we started looking into it, it wasn't really like, we never started out with the intention of being like, hey, what would be awesome is, what if we started this foundation? It was just sort of something that naturally came to us. Again, a lot of it's rooted in our family's experience of how people reacted to us, both in positive ways and without meaning to, even in almost negative ways. And we were able to see things that were genuinely helpful to us and other things that maybe weren't as helpful. And so we have 3 tiers that we focus on in our foundation that are sort of tied on postvention. And so those 3 tiers would be funeral-related financial aid. So that is basically what it sounds like when someone's died by suicide, and we generally work on word of mouth. Like, we have a website. It's really crappy if anyone sees it right now, but we do get a handful of people we've never met. But a lot of times it will be someone who's got firsthand friendship with them, and then they know us, and they'll just connect us. And so, but in those cases, we know how expensive it can be to pay for a funeral. And there are situations where life insurance will not cover a suicide. And sometimes people don't have life insurance, and then they're paying out of pocket. And then that's just the worst kind of case scenario is, some funerals cost between like $8,000 to $10,000 on average. And so a lot of people don't have that much money that they can just pay out of pocket. So then they're going into debt, and it's just this negative cycle. So that was one of the main areas that we focused on early on, was feeling like, even if we can't pay for a full funeral, what can we give, and what can the funds that come into us in our foundation, where can those go in a meaningful way? And we decided early on that was one of the main pillars that we wanted to focus on with kind of the postvention element. The other one, maybe you can talk about this one, is kind of the mental health side of things.
Yeah, our other remaining 2 pillars, they might kind of go hand in hand because a conversation can start from it, but we have a mental health tier and a peer education tier. So the peer education tier is to simply start talking about postvention and to start talking about mental health in general and get connected with communities and see what the needs are and then go from there. But our mental health resources is we've partnered with an app that can offer therapeutic services, grief support, different things of that nature, because trying to get in for a therapist, as a therapist, you only have as many hours in a day as you do. Like, I work 3 days a week. I only have a slot for about 20 to 25 clients. And then if I'm full, I'm full. That's it. And I think there is a demand for therapists right now, especially where we're living, like in northern Utah. It can fill up very quickly. So our app is helpful because you can get therapeutic aid almost directly, and you can have someone to help you guide you through the therapeutic process. Because grief, we've listened to some of your podcasts, and you guys have talked about grief, and grief can come in many forms. It's not just when you've lost someone, but when you've especially lost someone in a traumatic way, it's really exhausting to try to figure out how to ask for help or what you might even need. Because grief, we're not taught about grief in schools unless you studied it. Maybe you talked about it in your household, but most of us didn't, because we maybe don't focus on that, how to prepare for if someone dies by suicide or if we lost someone to something. So that's what we try to provide, is a space to talk about that and to have uncomfortable questions, or just a place for us to provide answers and things.
And maybe just to add on to that, like, for example, I had never really gone down the path of like talking to a therapist before, because I just didn't really feel like I had some of the more common struggles that people have when they do go to a therapist before this. And it just threw me into kind of this new world of feeling like I needed some professional help, but not really knowing where to turn in my case. And I found like that this resource that we partnered with, which is called Impact Collective or Impact Suite, was a really good fit for me, because I just needed kind of something quick. I didn't want to wait for weeks or months to set up an appointment. I just wanted some help quicker and sooner than later. And I kind of got what I needed out of it and was able to move on to other things. But that was sort of what we wanted, is we know how trying and how quickly things can turn on a dime for people who've experienced a loss like that. And so that's why we wanted to provide a resource for people who are going through it in a similar fashion.
Yeah. We've said before in some of our recordings that, I mean, I've never really experienced a lot of grief from something that wasn't suicide. And so, but I feel like there is this mental health aspect to grieving when you've lost somebody to suicide that you're talking about in your postvention. And the only way I can explain it is when you die by suicide, those thoughts and feelings that you had that pushed you to that point don't leave with you. They stay with everybody that loved you and that loves you. Like, those feelings don't leave this earth with you. They stay here with all of us that love you and are mourning you. And so that depression aspect, I now have not just my son dealing with it, but every single person in my family, even his aunts and uncles and his cousins. And those feelings of just feeling like life is too much, they're just contagious when there has been a significant loss to suicide. And so I think that postvention, like, one of the most daunting aspects for me after losing my son was I didn't just have to find myself a therapist, I had to find my kids a therapist. And so I had to get myself in, and then my son in, and then my daughter in. And calling therapists and having to explain your situation over and over and over again, just to say, like, we don't take your insurance, or we have a wait list, or we're 3 weeks out. And I'm like, when you're going through this in your mind, you have to find a release. You have to find, I think you're just desperate for any form of comfort that you can find. And I was desperate to get us into therapy. And so I love this structured. I've even thought, how people show up for you and you're almost shocked at the people that do show up for you. You're like, I don't know if I would have done this. I almost wish there was like a list of this is what they need. Like, if I had somebody that could have just called the therapist and said, okay, you have an appointment tomorrow, I'm taking you, But it sounds like that's something that you guys are putting into play, is that plan after the loss.
Yeah, we have worked on that a little bit, as much as we can. And, every situation is so unique. Different people need different things. Like, an introvert might not need the same kind of support that an extrovert might need. And some people want to kind of just be left alone when they're dealing with grief, and others do want to reach out and have that support. And so we understand that, not every situation is kind of a copy paste. This is exactly what to do in these situations. But that is one of the things that we try to work on, especially when we get a chance to kind of have an in-person booth or have an in-person event, is kind of give some suggestions of ways that people really can try to help in a meaningful way. One of the questions that brings to my mind is, really well-intentioned people who wanted to help, they would just say, let me know how I can help. Yeah. And then that was kind of the end of that conversation, right? Like, it's not that they didn't mean it, it's just that they genuinely didn't know what else to do other than just to kind of say, we're here, let us know what we can do for you. But I didn't know what I needed either. And so it's a difficult one. And so one of the handouts that we use, I'll just read a couple of these things off of here. Some things that in retrospect I felt like were kind of universally, at least somewhat universally applicable, is like, if someone is getting ready to host a funeral, and you have a neighbor or you have a close friend, that friend or that person could offer to, like, hey, if you have family coming out of town, we have a spare bedroom that we'd be happy to have them stay in. Rexburg, I feel like, is the king of having meals and food and treats kind of ready, but not everywhere is like that. And so, neighbors and communities that can have food and drop off like some frozen meals, that can be great. And actually, one thing that comes to my mind is one of the most meaningful things that someone dropped off was not a crumble cookie. It was actually a tray of vegetables, like a veggie tray. Just having something to eat that wasn't super unhealthy was very helpful to me. Offering to babysit is a great one that I don't think people a lot of times will think about. Offering to take dogs for a walk, just things like that. There's just some recommendations that we'll give to people. But yeah, absolutely. Like that's a really good thing that you bring up.
I think to add to that, if you Google this, it's called Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and it's in the shape of a pyramid, and it starts with like basic foundational needs, like heat, warmth, food, shelter, like all the basic needs of human life. And I think in my work as a therapist, a lot of people, when they're going through a depressive episode or they had a really big loss or a big life change that happened, they will go right down to the bottom, where it's like, I don't know how to make a meal. I feel like I'm in shock. I can barely take care of myself. It's almost like a sickness takes over a little bit, because that's kind of how I see depression, is it's like you are physically ill. Because for most of us, when we are sick, for those of us that maybe look at people with depression and we're like, I don't quite understand how that feels. Imagine being sick. You can't get up. Everything is really hard. It's hard to talk. It's hard to formulate thoughts. And so the Maslow's hierarchy of needs can be a great place to start if sometimes you don't know how to communicate yourself what you do need. But like my husband was saying, I think it's helpful to just be brave and say, hey, do you have dinner Tuesday night? And the person's like, I don't know. Okay, well, I'm bringing dinner. Any allergies? Not that I know of. Okay, I'm dropping something off. Just trying to be brave and offer something to the table. Because the worst thing that could happen is they'll just say, no, I don't want dinner. And then you're like, okay, I'll try to bring something else up. But it can be a challenge, like we've addressed. Sometimes you don't know what to ask for, and sometimes you don't know what to offer, because everybody's different. But the worst that can happen is you offer something up and they say no, and then you try again.
I love that. I think that when people have asked me, people have lost people since then. And, it's almost like you become the local expert on loss. And so people be like, how do I help this person? What can I do for them? And I just say the daily responsibilities that you have to do every day as a husband, a wife, a mom, a daughter, a son, those daily responsibilities are the ones that are the hardest. So one of the biggest things that people showed up for me, somebody dropped off a ton of paper plates and cutlery. Like I didn't have to do dishes for a month. Mm-hmm. And those type of things, the laundry, like the things that, obviously you don't eat unless people bring you food. You just don't. Yeah. But even the girl that cuts my hair showed up at my house, and she's like, you're getting a haircut, and those type of things. And when people ask me, I say, if you have a thought in your head to do something, just do it. Be like Nike, just do it. Don't talk yourself out of it. You're not annoying. Yes. But Kenzie, I'm interested because you've said before, like you've never been through this grief journey. And I remember not knowing how to handle people that went through this grief journey. And I was one of the people that just pretended that it didn't happen. What are your thoughts on being there when people are going through this? Because you have showed up for me, but I know there's been some questions in your mind.
Yeah. One thing, I got a really good piece of advice from a family member who had a extended family that I'm not related to, that had a really a horrible tragedy happen in their life, like 15 years ago or something. And she was explaining that this family member had this tragedy happen, and one of her dearest friends didn't know how to handle it and didn't know what to say and didn't know how to reach out and didn't know what to do. So she just didn't. And she didn't acknowledge it. She didn't do the uncomfortable things and reach out or try, make an effort. And to this day, they haven't talked since. And she told me that. And so just saying, no matter what, you need to acknowledge what happened, and you need to just be there and check in. Even if you feel like you're being obnoxious, just check in. And so that was one thing when I knew that Brandy was really going through it. I knew that I felt like I couldn't offer much, but I knew that I wasn't going to let what happened to this family friend happen to me and Brandy, because I was not going to let that happen, And so I remember thinking I'm probably being obnoxious. And there were a lot of times that I was like, was not expecting a response. I wasn't even expecting like a like or a heart. I just wanted her, if she ever looked at her phone, to know that she had someone that was thinking about her. I mean, it was uncomfy for me a lot, but I just, from the beginning, I'm really grateful that this family member gave me that advice, because I think my initial response to other people is usually to just not acknowledge it, because I don't want to make them feel uncomfortable. And so I kind of just dance around it, you know? So when she had told me that, I was like, hey, that's not going to happen with me. I'm not going to let my relationship with Brandy be affected by how uncomfortable it can be sometimes to talk about this. You know? But I think another thing that I had going for me is, you have known me for a really long time, and you've known that I've struggled with depression and anxiety. And we had just had really serious conversations about me being really sick, and you were helping me. And so I think I knew that you knew that I kind of understood a glimpse of what Elia had gone through. I don't know, but it is an interesting
dynamic
place to be,
yes.
Because obviously I never want to be able to relate to what you guys have both gone through. And so it like hurts my heart that I know that you guys have experienced pain on that level and I haven't. It feels unfair, but I know that the best that I can do is just show up and keep showing up. You know,
something that has stuck with me for a long time is Kenzie came and sat with me. You know, after the funeral, there's like the pictures are everywhere and the flowers and the everything. And I would just sit in the middle of the pictures, and knowing that Kenzie had been so sick, and she just sat with me in silence in the pictures. But it was like, I now completely understood the feelings that she had when she was sick. And it was like a comfort not being in that alone. Because now I'm struggling with those thoughts and feelings, and sitting with somebody that makes you not feel crazy when you're having those invasive thoughts, and when you're, you know, like somebody that can relate on such a deep level of, I see you and I understand, that was huge. So her love language is gift giving, and she would go and drop off these big baskets of things. And it was helpful because it like, even like crap she did not need, but I just had to give something to show my love. But that day that we just sat in silence and sat in the pain together, that meant so much to me. Another thing, I had this interesting conversation with my son, who's 14, this week, and he's kind of shifting friend groups. And this one friend group has been with him through this year. They were there that day, you know, and one of the things that he helped him cope was he needs to be surrounded by friends. So a week after my son passed, we had a wiffle ball tournament at our house with like 15, 14-year-old boys for him. And that's what he needed. And he said the other day, like, he's kind of shifting to a different friend. And I was like, you know, these friends have been really good for you. I just want you to know they're good friends. And he said, I know. He said, this friend acknowledges that something happened. And I need that right now. He said, my other friends are really good friends, but they pretend like nothing happened. And this other friend checks in, and he's 14. And I'm looking at him like, how are you so smart? And he said, this other friend texts me constantly and says, how are you? How are you doing? And he's like, I don't want to pretend like nothing happened. I need the acknowledgement. That's a true friend to me right now. And my eyes were like,
that's such a great, I agree with that 100%. Like, again, in my experience, I had some really awesome people who were there kind of in the immediate aftermath. And then I think like Kenzie kind of said, a lot of people get really uncomfortable after that, and they're kind of like, well, I did what I could there, and now I'm not ever going to talk to that person about that again because it might make them feel uncomfortable. I just have so much support for what you just said in my heart about trying to make a conscientious effort of staying in touch. It really does mean a lot, because like there are stories every once in a while I'll hear about my mom that I never knew, and if people feel that like they're uncomfortable to talk about my mom to me, there's still things that I never knew about her that I love learning about. Before we decided to actually launch our foundation, so my mom passed away, then about 6 months after that, one of my good friends from college also died by suicide. And it was really tough. I didn't know his family very well. They lived in Colorado. But me and some of my other really good friends from college that were his good friends We all went to the funeral. Some of them knew the family a little bit, some didn't. But we sat around for hours just telling them these stories about their son that he probably would have never told them because he was too shy to tell them, but kind of some inappropriate stories that certainly would never have come to light afterwards. And they loved it. They loved hearing these stories about their son. And that's something that I think about too, is if people are so nervous to make me feel uncomfortable, they might never open that door of helping me hear a great story about my mom. And that definitely means a lot to me. And so I'm glad you brought that up. I think that's a really good point.
I love that.
I don't want to miss the chance to hear about your mom.
I think we want to know, like, your mom.
I'm happy to talk about my mom. The logo of our foundation is something that maybe I want to hit on a little bit. It's half of a sunrise at the top, and then at the bottom is a sunflower. And those are two things that I think about a lot when I think about my mom. She loved being in the sun. Like, in the dead of winter, there would be a slight, small little sun patch that would come through our windows. She would always just want to be in the sun. And she loved seeing the sunrise. She loved seeing the sunset. She just really loved being outside. That's still kind of a way that I feel like I connect with her a little bit, is just being outdoors, enjoying, nature. And so we wanted to kind of honor that a little bit in our logo. And so the sunrise has got multiple meanings. Obviously, suicide is a really tough thing where you feel like it's hopeless, but we want people to realize that if you just can keep going, there is light afterwards, and there is a good life you can still live even with a major loss. And in some ways, like that event that happened to you and how you respond to it can actually make you a more complete and a more full person. There's a quote that I really like by Oscar Wilde. I think it's experience is the hardest teacher, gives you the test first and the lesson second. And that, it just is a great quote to me because it's so true. Experience really is the kind of thing that you have to go through in order to learn and in order to grow. And I would never want someone to go through what we've gone through in our lives. That's a lesson I wish people didn't have to learn. But regardless, it really has pushed me to become a different person, and I hope a better person. And I know that that's the kind of life that my mom would want me to live. Maybe to bring it back to your initial question, the other thing that she really always loved was seeing sunflowers. They're like half a weed, half a flower, but we had this sunflower patch in my house that kind of started coming up, and it sort of took over this little flower garden area by my front door. And my mom just loved those sunflowers, and so those are kind of two of the things I think about is the sun and the sunflower. And so that's a big part of why we made our logo is those things. She was a great woman, though. She was inappropriate in some ways, and in other ways, she was like just one of the best people I've ever met. I feel like I had the best mom in the world. I hope everyone feels like that, but I really, really loved and had a great relationship with my mom. But it wasn't just me who knew my mom. My wife obviously knew her well also, so I'll give you a chance to talk about what I've missed.
Yeah, it was so energetic, so fun. I remember meeting her and just thinking, she's so young. Like, I want to be her. She's goals. She would go on fun girls' trips with her girls, and she would just run and play and just be so accepting of everybody. I mean, when I was dating my husband and I got to know her, I have had my own mental health struggles. I've dealt with suicidal ideation in the past, and she was so warm and welcoming towards that. She never judged me, ever. I mean, she was like a mom to me. She was amazing. I mean, we would talk almost every day. We became so close, and we could have so much fun. That was a skill that she had. I grew up in Los Angeles. I grew up in a really fun place, and then I went to college in Rexburg, Idaho. And I respected her so much because we in the most random place, and she would just come up with something fun to do. And it wasn't Disneyland. It wasn't the beach. It wasn't like the Hollywood Bowl, the stuff that I grew up with. She could make something out of anything. And I respected that so much about her. And she really taught me it's about the people you're with instead of the places you are. It was such a blast to come back and visit her in Rexburg. Really was a big part of Rexburg for me, and my college experience, my dating experience. And yeah, she was literal sunshine. I mean, she was so fun. So fun. I mean, we would just laugh for hours. I mean, she was an amazing person. Yeah, missed her a lot.
That's amazing.
That is amazing. I can see the love that you guys have for it as you're talking. It's really touching. And then it's really cool, Matt, to see your relationship with her. I feel like, I don't know, it was reminding me of like you with your kids. Just, it's really special. Like you feel like you had the best mom in the world. I know that your kids feel the same way. And I just think that that's something that I aspire for my kids.
I just wanted to say how amazing it is that you two decided to focus your energy on helping others. And that doesn't always happen. Turning inward when you are grieving and when you're going through a loss is easy to do. And so I guess what brought this about? How did you take your pain and channel it into something to help other people?
Yeah, I'll go first, and then you can go, Tess. I grew up in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I'm sure many of your guests have talked about that. And I just felt like from kind of a young age, I felt this connection with serving other people and finding personal joy and personal satisfaction out of it. And that was from a young age. I did not always feel that way, just to be clear. There was times where we were told to go out and shovel neighbors' drives, and I had no desire in my heart to go do that. But just the older I've gotten and the more experience I've gotten and acquired in my life, I have found that connection for myself, that when I am trying my best to serve other people and help them, it has a kind of a symbiotic relationship with my own well-being. And I feel like I am also kind of healing myself a little bit. And that's probably my best answer as to why we turned outwards, is we just had some unique personal and professional background experience to feel like we could actually help somebody out there. And we can definitely still improve our foundation, but the families that we have been able to connect with and the cases we've been able to open and the funerals we've been able to help pay for have really just brought so much personal joy and satisfaction to me, and I'm sure to my wife as well. But I would say that is kind of at the core of it. It's just a way that we feel like we can give back, and it also helps us at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, to add to that, I think for me, that is a big reason why I became a therapist, is because I had so many of my own struggles, and I had gotten so much out of something like therapy, a sense of community. And there's something so healing about taking a very specific trauma that you have been through and share your experience. And I have such respect for you ladies starting this podcast. I mean, what a wonderful way to start the discussion, to see vulnerable conversations happening and to see that it's okay to talk about these things, and it doesn't have to be so scary. I mean, even when you were talking about, just sitting on the floor together and just being present, it reminds me of this video. She's like a renowned therapist, spokesperson, and everything. Her name's Brene Brown, but there's this video called, I think it just has empathy in the title, but it simply talks about what you were feeling. Empathy is being able to sit down with someone in their pain and just be with them. It doesn't even have to be the same trauma. I think that can be kind of a confusion with empathy. You don't have to have been through the same thing, because empathy at its core is, I see that you're sad and I see that you're in pain, and I will sit with you because I too have been sad and I have been in pain. And that's what humans need. That's what people need. I mean, I work with a lot of teenagers and parents, and sometimes that's what can simplify a lot of things. It's like, I don't know what my teenager needs. I don't know what my kids need. I don't know how to help them. And it's like, well, I think just being with them and seeing them, even if they are different from you, with our spouses, our families, just everybody, I think that's what can connect humans so well, and that's why humans need connection. They need supports. And I loved hearing about your son, because it sounded like he was almost going through the different stages of, a grieving process and being like, I think I'm ready for this now. I'm ready to have someone sit with me and acknowledge that feeling of, hey, I've known and loved somebody too, and I'd like to talk about them. And I know your person is gone, but we can still talk about them together. And I can be that space for you, right? Even though it might be different. That's the beauty of empathy, is it's so far reaching. You don't have to have the same exact experiences. But I think people feel intimidated by that because maybe they haven't had those experiences. But I've learned as a therapist, I have many clients that have very different backgrounds that I have no experience in. Like, I wasn't a war veteran. I wasn't a lot of these different things that they're dealing with. But I know the feeling. I know how it feels to be alone, and I know how it feels to be struggling and to feel hopeless. And a lot of us can relate to those core things. So empathy is a beautiful thing. And I think you feel empathy through service.
And maybe just really quickly to tie on to that is when we have needed help in our lives and somebody else provided it, it is just such a great thing to be able to feel like you're doing that same thing for somebody else who might need help. My wife, just last year, she actually got diagnosed with cancer and went through a cancer treatment and had kind of the physical, like people could physically see that she was going through a sickness and was going through something that was a big struggle for her in her life.
Out past year.
Yeah, and we got a lot of people who could see, like physically, hey, that family looks like they're struggling. Let's help them out. Let's see what we can do to provide support for them. But the mental health is not that way. People try to almost avoid it. They don't want to feel uncomfortable, but those same people could be just as sick. The point that I was trying to make is that obviously that was a big struggle and a big chapter in our lives was when Tess was going through cancer. But the reason that I brought it up is that cancer was such like a physical thing that people could see. They could see that we had a sickness and that we were struggling with something, and she was physically weak and she had things that she needed help with. And we had a lot of people kind of come to the table and try to come and help out with that. But the mental health side of things, people can be just as sick, in my opinion, and it can be just as dangerous. But a lot of times people who know that or see signs of somebody is struggling with mental health, they might not get the same level of care. And the same level of support from their friends and their family. And so that's just a unique thing that we've seen is kind of the difference of a physical ailment versus a mental health ailment. But what would you add on to that?
Yeah, I think it was interesting because, as I've mentioned, I've dealt a lot with mental health struggles. And those are very, I think, private. I think a lot of us have grown up learning to mask those things. We mask feeling depressed. We might overcompensate. Most people that know me, I'm a pretty bubbly, outgoing, social person. And I remember in my 20s when I finally figured out that I did have anxiety and depression, that was so strange to me. I almost didn't believe it myself. But I realized a lot of the ways that I personally overcompensated to show that I wasn't a depressed person. I was, happy and bubbly, and that truly is a part of me. But I think that is the main key difference there is with mental health. Sometimes it is the brain loves to come up with coping skills. In fact, suicide is one of them. It comes from a different part of the brain. That hopelessness and the I think final straw where you say, I'm done. I don't think I can do this anymore. But that can be really well hidden. And I think that's why prevention is so stressed, right? We're trying to figure out how to prevent it. What can we do? What can we do to show up for these people? But with the cancer, it was interesting because it was out there in the open. I mean, it was like I was a bald woman. I didn't really like wearing the wigs. They were itchy and annoying. So I just rocked the bald look, and you would get looks and people would talk to you all the time. So yeah, it was almost like wearing a sign where it was like, hey, I'm struggling, and everybody can see that. And I think that can be hard because I think in a strange way as a therapist, there might be some benefits to that where it's like, hey, I really am struggling and there are some outward signs to look for and I could use some help right now. But then there's a con. I mean, it's out for everyone to see and you don't always want the help. You're just kind of like, can I grocery shop just by myself? I don't want to, talk to you about this, but I still think it's good for people to have good intentions. And like we were talking about earlier, I think it's a two-way thing. I think we have to figure out how to communicate our needs and what we maybe want in a situation, and then figure out, how to help other people show up to the plate, because it's hard. It's really challenging. And like my husband was mentioning a sickness, I mean, I can personally vouch for both sides. I mean, when I was going through chemotherapy, you're pretty sick and tired and it feels like you can't do a lot, and I can vouch and say that depression can feel, it may sound strange, similar in a lot of ways. You're not able to take care of yourself. You feel like, and that is the thing with depression. Depression's a very active thing. It's almost like something is sucking the life out of you. It's a very active process. Most people see it as lazy, but it's not. And much like my healing, I looked pretty lazy during chemo, but it's because it was a really active process that was undergoing throughout my entire body and taking so much out of me, and I wasn't myself. I think depression, and when depression's fermented too long, it might lead to suicidal ideation, it might lead to suicidal planning. It can have a similar effect. It is kind of like a cancer in a way. I think that's a way we've talked about suicide a lot together, is how it can be kind of like a sickness, something that creeps in slowly, but people can't see it.
That insight is so valuable and I think validating for so many people. I mean, me personally, I'm so grateful for you guys taking your pain and turning it into support for other people. And I know that your foundation and you guys personally have blessed my life. And just thank you for what you guys are doing and for being on this podcast with us. I feel honored to have you guys on here with us. So
likewise, we feel honored to have been asked. Thank you for reaching out and inviting us. We're more than happy to share our story. So thanks for giving us the opportunity.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that you guys both are great examples of resilience. I mean, you've been through so much. In the past 3 years, you guys have been through it. I can't even comprehend what that would be like. And then to see you guys on the other side of it, and you're just like this symbol of hope to other people. And I hope you realize how beautiful that is. It makes me emotional because I think a lot of people wouldn't have the strength, myself included. Like, I don't know if I would be able to do what you guys are doing after all you've been through. And so I just hope you know that we feel so honored to have had the opportunity to sit here and listen to you guys tell your story. It's just pretty remarkable. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. Maybe just really quick on that, if you don't mind me just sharing one last thing. There's an example that I like to give. I do a lot of work with teenagers in my community, and one of the stories I like to tell them is this analogy of how golf balls changed over the area. And I know that sounds like a really weird transition, but let me just give this example and it'll make sense. In like the mid 1800s, golf balls were just these completely round, and they're still round. They were these smooth round balls that as golfers played more and more with the balls that got hit, they realized that the balls that got hit the most were the ones that they wanted to play with because for whatever reason they performed better. And these little dings that the balls would get would provide dimples and little imperfections in the ball. And don't ask me how, but somehow scientifically those little holes in the ball make the ball perform better and go further. So that's why today's golf balls have the little divots in them pre-made. And so I've always liked that analogy of kind of the more we go through in life and the more experiences that we have a chance to kind of get knocked down and pick ourselves back up, further I think we can go, and the more resilient we can be. And I've always liked that concept, just because maybe, like it or not, and Tess and I both have had these experiences where we've had to get up. I've always liked the concept of the more we go through, the stronger we can become. And so I just wanted to, share that really briefly.
No, I appreciate you sharing that. I think that is the perfect note to end this podcast on and this episode on. That was perfect. So once again, thank you guys. And to our listeners, thank you for being here with us for another week. We appreciate you and your support. And we see you, and I hope that our weekly episodes are a reminder that you guys are not alone. And we will see you guys next week.
See ya.